Hi everybody, Nips at Nerd Bacon here with my very first video review. And yes, I am using my shitty headset mic. I don't want to talk about it, okay? What I do want to talk about is This Is the Police. What is that game, you might ask? Well, if you're pretty into management sims, or at least like to dip your toes into games like Papers, Please once in a while, you may find some things to enjoy about this title. However, as I'll get into, I can only recommend this game for people who are really into immersive management sims, since This Is the Police is plagued by more than a handful of shortcomings that really have me questioning why I've sunk so much time into this game. Alright, on to the review. In this game, you control Jack Boyd, chief of police for the town of Freeburg. Jack is getting on in years, and it's almost time for him to retire. In fact, he doesn't have much of a choice. The mayor is forcing him to quit in as few as 180 days. Things aren't so bad, though. Jack has made it his mission to make at least $500,000 before he retires. How is he going to do that? Through mob connections and bureaucratic trickery, of course. Duh. First and foremost, This Is the Police is a quote-unquote real-time management sim. You have your roster of police and your roster of detectives, and your job is simply to make sure that things run smoothly on a day-to-day basis. Using your wits and experiential know-how, you're tasked with responding to 911 calls, sending the appropriate police out to do the job, and even giving on-the-spot instructions for some of the trickier situations. Each of your officers has a professionalism rating, and this rating will affect how good they are at handling situations. From what I can tell, it really just boils down to a simple numbers game. Each 911 call seems to have a hidden number based on its level of seriousness. You either meet that invisible number, or you fail. Because of this, responding to calls on a day-to-day basis becomes a very subjective experience, making it extremely crucial to carefully read each call in order to accurately assess the level of danger that your police might be in. A simple bar fight might only require one or two relatively experienced cops, while a bank robbery or a massive drug deal will most definitely take a much stronger force to deal with. On top of that, your officers have different ranks that have nothing to do with their actual skill level. Sending a higher ranked officer with police of lower ranks will actually boost the performance of the lower ranked officers. This can be an extremely useful tool when dealing with tricky situations, and is also good for giving lower ranked officers some much needed experience. Occasionally, you're given the opportunity to send backup to a call that's already in progress, but this is too rare to rely on, and, more often than not, is actually a nuisance. Each cop's successful mission will net them 10 experience points, which raises their professionalism rating. Each unsuccessful mission, however, will net them just as many points in the negative. In this way, if you're clever, you can grow the strength of your force while also developing little narratives about your cops in your head. Along the way, I ended up hiring a cop with a professionalism rating of 5. 5! This cop was absolutely good for nothing, and failed more than a handful of assignments at first. I thought about firing them, but decided to stick it out, and, over time, even saw that same officer rise to the ranks of my department as a rather distinguished enforcer. I developed my own story for them in my head, imagining them as Officer Pryzbylewski from HBO's The Wire, becoming halfway decent police over time, despite their shortcomings. This isn't a paid advertisement, I promise. But, if you want to sponsor us, HBO, consider this an official invitation. Of course, negative experience points are not the only consequence for bad management, since some of your officers can straight up die in the line of duty. It is often very stunning and heartbreaking when this happens, but it's not always a bad thing. Which reminds me. Remember when I mentioned how the main character, Jack Boyd, is involved with the Mafia? Well, this is where This Is the Police takes a much more sinister turn. Using your mob connections, it's possible to do things such as arrange the deaths of your own police or detectives, which can sometimes make your life easier. Say an officer plans on testifying against you in court, and buying them out would cost way too much money. Simply have him killed. Now, I know how crass and cold this looks. Believe me, I'm on your side. When I first started playing This Is the Police, I tried to roleplay as the complex good guy who only cooperated with the mob when he absolutely had to, but I was punished pretty severely by the game for doing so. Simply put, This Is the Police is not that type of game. In order to succeed, you gotta play it the way the developers want you to. Once you get around that initial hurdle and start thinking about your police officers as mere pawns, however, a much different game unfolds before you. Taking odd jobs from the mob and using my officers efficiently while also effectively eliminating any of them who dared oppose me or simply became a burden to the department, I was well on my way to making my $500,000. I became transfixed by the mesmerizing flow of This Is the Police, really getting invested in each 911 call, weighing my options at each turn while also moving my forces around in just the right way so as to maintain maximum efficiency and profitability. And this is when the greater metagame of This Is the Police revealed itself to me. Basically, you have three entities that you want to try to keep happy at all times in order to reap the maximum profit: your police force, the mafia, and City Hall. Say you overwork your officers, or some of them get killed within a couple days of each other. Your officers will not look kindly on that, and some of them may even testify against you in court, potentially costing you money, making you lose part of your workforce, or, in the most extreme case, ending your game completely. Say you thwarted the mafia's crimes one too many times or refused to help them. Well, they will straight up kill you, ending your game completely. Say you ignored the mayor's requests one too many times, letting protests go unanswered or simply not playing ball in other matters. Well, say goodbye to some of your workers, because City Hall will take them away from you, making the road ahead that much more arduous. Do right by City Hall, however, and you can request raises and increases in your workforce, creating a very satisfying feedback loop if you get good at it. In this way, This Is the Police becomes a balancing act as you do the best you can to keep each entity from getting so mad at you that you start to suffer repercussions. Throughout my playthroughs, I found that I could basically afford to keep the Mafia and my own staff at only a moderate degree of happiness in favor of staying in City Hall's good graces at all times, since they were the most effective way of improving my department's effectiveness. There may be other schools of thought here. This is simply what I've discovered for myself. So, I've talked at length about the minute-by-minute gameplay of This Is the Police, as well as the larger metagame surrounding your police work. But what about the detective work? Well, that's a whole new ballgame in itself. Occasionally, a different sort of crime will pop up, represented by a purple color. These are investigations. They work similarly to 911 calls in that you have to assign skilled detectives to work them, but they take a lot longer to complete. At the end of each day, depending on the skill level of your assigned detectives, you will be awarded new frames for your open investigation. Cross-referencing those frames with what the witnesses have to say about the event, your job is simply to put the frames in the right order. Once you've done that, you will have a subject to arrest. But that doesn't mean it's all over, because if you assign the wrong police to do the arresting or neglect to send a SWAT team, you risk botching the arrest itself, effectively failing the investigation. Of course, the investigation system isn't perfect. Some of the correct answers don't seem to make sense, since they're sometimes pretty subjective, and it's hard to tell exactly what's going on in each frame. Also, as I'll get into later, it can be pretty easy to fail investigations for unexpected, bullshit reasons. As an addition to regular investigations, you can also bust gangs, taking down perpetrators one by one in a sequential order in order to reap a really big bounty at the end. This involves interrogating subjects and solving specialized cases that you can tackle at your leisure, most of the time. Fail even one gang member, however, and you lose the opportunity to take down the entire gang. I've found the gang-busting system to be quite a bit of a plus-minus, and would only recommend it if City Hall really demands it from you, or if you're feeling particularly confident. There are even some gang-busting options that will change the course of events, as well as future gameplay, so that's pretty cool. As if that weren't enough, This Is the Police takes all of these systems and layers even more gimmicks on top of them. As the story progresses, things get harder for old Jack Boyd in different ways, requiring the player to wear many hats throughout the course of the story. One era has the player helping their respective mafia group win a gang war against another mafia, tallying up their points at the end of each day. Another era showcases a serial killer that is terrorizing Freeburg, requiring the player to put their best detective hat on in order to solve a true, long-form mystery. These gimmicks are great tools to freshen up the gameplay of This Is the Police, and I'm really happy they're there. You really get a feeling of progression as you move from one gimmick era to the next, even if you ignore the main story. Alright, now that I've said all the good stuff, time to unload the real horse shit and explain why I can only recommend this game to players who are really into this type of game. Welcome to the first ever video edition of Nips's Complaint Corner, where I air my grievances with This Is the Police back to back to back. Settle in and enjoy as I bitch about this game for a couple minutes. I don't know. The biggest flaw with This Is the Police is that the rules of engagement are not exactly clear from the outset of the game. Like I mentioned earlier, it wasn't clear to me that I didn't have a choice when it came to dealing with the mob, leading me to role-playing instead of playing the game as intended. If the game had just flat out told me the kind of character Jack Boyd was supposed to be, I might have figured this out a lot more quickly. Also, I didn't realize that it was an option to simply refuse some of City Hall's requests. Literally within the first few days, City Hall asks you to fire all your black cops. If I had known I could have simply not done that, it would have saved me a lot of trouble and heartache. This is a running issue with This Is the Police, as if the developers want you to read their minds. It's understandable that some of these secret rules would be obvious to them, But that's what playtesting is for. I sincerely doubt that none of these issues would come up in playtesting, so it's hard to say whether more playtesting needed to be done, or worse, these issues were simply ignored. On that note, the conditions for meeting certain requests are extremely vague. For example, I once failed a mission that required me to produce 2 dead police officers, simply because it wasn't obvious that I was supposed to hold on to the bodies instead of scheduling their funerals. I actually went out of my way to have those cops killed, in order to make some cash, and now I failed because the mission didn't specify that particular caveat? Unfortunately, issues like these happen often throughout This Is the Police. When it comes to investigations, it's not obvious at first that not sending a detective the first day that an investigation opens will fail the investigation. This led me to failing an investigation early on through no fault of my own. An issue like this could easily be fixed with a warning or something, to remind you that you could potentially fail the investigation due to negligence. While we're on that note, it's not obvious at first that having the lead detective of a case die will fail the case. This is especially frustrating because it's extremely easy to archive cases for long periods of time and open them again later. So, how is the detective dying any different? This wouldn't be as annoying of an issue, of course, if the game simply told you this was a thing. Finding out issues like these at the last minute is not an ideal situation. I found the cutscenes to be extremely boring, and there are way too many of them. I must say, I got to a point where I was fast-forwarding through every cutscene, because each one seems determined to waste more and more of your time, while all you really want is to get lost in the mesmerizing flow of This Is the Police. On top of that, the voice acting is a little hammy, specifically when it comes to Jack Boyd, the central character, who sounds more like the main character of a B movie.
Hell, if there weren't any rules, I'd be belching and farting, jumping up on the table, arms held high, yelling, "Shake it, baby!"
Finally, This Is the Police has this weird sort of split personality between its attempts at atmosphere. The general atmosphere of the day-to-day gameplay is really good. Listening to your police sirens as you watch the little dots move across the city while listening to some jazz is quite soothing. But there are weird quirks here and there that confuse the overall experience. Moments like when Jack tries to rev up his car every single day, or when the procedurally generated casino chips fall onto the table throughout the gang war. These moments are definitely unique and experimental, but they honestly feel out of place in This Is the Police, a game that is otherwise pretty straightforward. Alright, that about does it. Thanks for sitting through yet another edition of Nips's Complaint Corner. This Is the Police is a very fun game in its best moments. The atmosphere of the day-to-day gameplay really sucks you in, and it's easy to get lost in the narrative of the 911 calls. Pulling off expert maneuvers as you move your employees around and skirt the law feels really good, but there are a lot, and I mean a lot of moments where you want to say what the f*** and toss your computer in the garbage. A lot of these problems could have been easily fixed by being a little bit more explicit in the rules, but as it stands, the gameplay can often be as confusing as this game's atmosphere, which seems to shift gears at really weird times. Because of these drawbacks, I would only recommend this game for people who really like real-time sims. My nerd rating for This Is the Police is a 6.5 out of 10. Well, now that there's an audio recording of me talking at length about working with the mob and killing police, I'm most definitely on an FBI watch list, so I hope it was worth it in the name of your entertainment. Anyway, what did you think? Leave a comment if you agreed or disagreed, and like and subscribe. You know how it goes.